Can women wear tefilliin? Now, the best way to learn any topic in Judaism is to go to the Torah or to the Oral Torah. Why do women have so few mitzvot in the Torah? There's a law in the oral law that teaches us that women are not obligated to observe any law that is positive, meaning you should do this, and that is time bound, so that has a fixed time of practice. And there is many such laws in the Torah. And one of the questions is, so why is women excluded from many of these mitzvot that men need to do? And I think that this section in Maseches Brachos would clear up many of your questions, which is related to the question, can a woman or should a woman wear tefillin, as well as why do women need to keep less mitzvot. So let's dive into the Talmud, and it is talking in this daf about various subjects, but I'll read you the mishnah, as it's my belief that you should always start with the mishnah and go from there. So the mishnah starts on daf 17b, and it says as follows. And the way the Quran works is it fills in a bit of detail, and there's various translations into English, which the Art Scroll is probably the most famous. But the Quran has the added advantage of filling in some of the missing detail, number one, in the actual text, as well as providing some personality background, some notes, as well as some halachot that we actually practice today. So let's start with the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, the Mishnah relates another episode portraying unusual conduct by Rabban Gamliel. Now, Rabban Gamliel was a Nasi in the time. He bathed on the first night after his wife died. His students said to him, "Have you not taught us, our teacher, that the mourner is prohibited to bathe?" There is a halakha that the mourner, someone that has lost a close relative, a mother, a father, is not allowed to bathe within the first 30 days. He answered them, "I am not like other people, I am delicate. For me, not to bath causes actual physical distress, and even a mourner need not suffer physical distress as part of his mourning." There is a concept, there is halakha within the Talmud that if you are in mourning, there's certain things that you should not do within the first 30 days. But if it causes you physical harm or physical distress, then you obviously don't need to observe those laws. Another exceptional incident is related. And when his slave Tavi died, Rabban Gamliel accepted condolences for his death, as one would for a close family member. His students said to him, "Have you not taught us, our teacher, that one does not accept condolences from the death of slaves?" Rabban Gamliel said to his students, "My slave Tavi is not like all the rest of the slave. He was virtuous, and it is appropriate to accord him the same respect accorded to a family member." Now, you do not really mourn for slaves, and slaves in general in Judaism is quite complicated. Slaves in the Jewish respect is not like slaves like you would think slave, like a black guy on a ship being chained going to America, for example, from Africa. Slaves in the Jewish world was actually people that had a debt to pay to someone that was Jewish, and because they could not pay this debt, the Jew told this person that you should work for me, basically become my slave, and in that way you will pay off your debt. And another point to mention here is that there's a lot of halachot how to treat a slave. Number one, you should feed your slave first before you eat. You should obviously not physically harm your slave, as most people, when they think of slavery, they're thinking of whips and physical torture. That is completely forbidden in Jewish halakha. So that is what Rabban Gamliel meant about his slave Tavi. And there's many stories about his slave. He was a righteous non-Jew, and Rabban Gamliel obviously was very close to this non-Jew. And there is also the concept in Judaism that righteous non-Jews that observe the 7 laws of Noah have a share in the world to come. With regards to the recitation of the Shema on one's wedding night, the sages said that if, despite his exemption, a groom wishes to recite the Shema on his first night, he may do so. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, not everyone who wishes to assume reputation of a God-fearing person may assume it, and consequently, not everyone who wishes to recite the Shema on his wedding night may do so. So, earlier in Maseches Brachos, they were talking about reciting the Shema, and there's halakha that you do not need to recite the Shema. We are obligated to recite the Shema in the morning and at night, because it says in the Torah just after the Shema is obviously Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Hear me, O Israel, I'm the Lord your God is one. And it says after that you shall talk about these matters when you lie down and when you arise. And the Gemara established earlier in Brachos that means at the time when normal people arise and at the time when normal people go to sleep. So it's obviously time-bound. And there was an exception that people getting married to a virgin do not need to recite the Shema. And the reason is because they are occupied in their mind with a mitzvah to follow, which is pruvu, to be fruitful and multiply, to be intimate with the person that they are going to get married to. And thus, they do not need to recite the Shema. Now, that was in that time, which is 2,000 years ago. Now, current day halacha is that we do not have the kavanah, the intention and the concentration on the Shema as people did 2,000 years ago. I mean, now you just say the Shema because you are obligated to do so. But in those times, it was obviously people were more connected and spiritually on a much higher level. So they were not obligated to say the Shema if they were to get married. And that is basically what this last section in the Mishnah says, is that a groom wishes to recite the Shema on the first night, he may do so. Meaning that if you are getting married and you're getting married to a virgin, obviously, then you actually can recite the Shema, because we are no longer on that spiritual level, and that's also the halacha that was brought earlier in Brachos. So that was basically the Mishnah that I wanted to cover to get into the Gemara that follows. Because I always believe that you should first go to the Mishnah in order to study the Gemara, and that's why I always include the Mishnah, even though it doesn't always relate to what I'm trying to teach in this advanced Jewish learning. So now we go into women and their status in Judaism, because there is a belief in the wider world and in the Jewish world that women have a much lower status than men. And that is because women are excluded in many mitzvot that men do. So we as men need to go to Shacharis, the morning prayer. We need to go to Mincha, the midday prayer. We need to go to Ma'ariv, the evening prayer. Preferably, we need to pray with Minyan, which is 10 men. And also another preference, also mentioned in Brachos, is to pray within a study hall, which is considered better than a synagogue. That's a few side points. But actually, women in Halakha and in Jewish law in general have a very high status. And that's something that's not often highlighted in Judaism. But I'm reading for you straight from the Talmud. And this is in Brachos, Masechet Brachos, in 17a, towards the end of the daf of 17a. And it states as follows. The Gemara states, "Greater is the promise for the future made by the Holy One, blessed be He, to women than to men. As it is stated, rise up, women at ease, hear my voice, confident daughters, listen to what I say." And this is in Isaiah 32 verse 9. This promise of ease and confidence is not given to men. So as we read in this section in the Tanakh from the prophet Isaiah, that he only promises this ease to the confident daughters, and he does not include men in his prophecy. Now, obviously, the Gemara wants to know, the rest of the rabbis, the rest of the commentators want to know, how can the Gemara say such a thing? So, obviously, the first one to comment is Rav, said to Rabbi Chaya, "By what virtue do women merit to receive this reward?" Rabbi Chaya answers, "They merit this reward for bringing their children to read the Torah in the synagogue and for sending their husbands to study mishnah in the study hall and for waiting for their husbands until they return from the study hall." So it's clear from here that women are rewarded more than men, and they share in the mitzvot of the men because they are allowing their children to study Torah, and most importantly, they are allowing their husbands to study Torah and involve themselves with the various mitzvot. Because obviously, if you are married to someone that doesn't allow you to do these things, then you wouldn't be able to do it. But because you chose a good wife, and she knows the importance of the Torah and the importance of studying the Torah, she allows you to do all these things. And for that, the Talmud states here in Brachos 17a, at the end of the page, that they share in the mitzvot of the men who they support. And I think that's a very important point, because women often feel that they, like I said, they are being excluded and they don't have as many mitzvot. And that is actually because they have a much higher level in Judaism than men do. They are closer to correction than men are in the Torah, and that is why men have more mitzvot and women have less mitzvot. Because we as men have more to correct in ourselves. And that's why we need more mitzvot, because the mitzvot basically leads us to the good path, to the straight path. And women are naturally more spiritually connected than men are. They cry much easier than men do. They are more emotionally connected than we are. And they generally just have a better connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. With that being said, we're moving into the actual topic, which is, can women wear tefillen? So this appears also in Maseches Brachos on Daf 20b, which is the main section, but the Mishnah starts at the end of Daf 20a, and the Mishnah is as follows. Women, slaves, and minors who have parallel obligations in various mitzvot are exempt from the recitation of the shema and from tefillen, but they are obligated in the mitzvot of prayer, mezuzah, and grace after meals. The Gemara explains the rationale for these exemptions and obligations below. So first of all, let's focus on the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is grouping three people together: women, slaves, and minors. Now, many women would probably not like to be in that category, but the reason the Mishnah is putting women, slaves, and minors into the same category is because all three of these are obligated in mitzvot, negative mitzvot for sure, but are not obligated in positive, time-bound mitzvot. And that is because women's role is mostly in the house, looking after children. Like we just said, one of their merits is that they send their kids to learn Torah and they support their husbands in learning Torah. So that's one of their merits, is looking after the house while the husband and the children is able to study Torah. And the same applies to slaves. Like I mentioned earlier, slaves is not like the slaves that we imagine in the secular world. Black guy in a boat being chained. But actually slaves have quite a high status in Judaism. It's basically someone trying to pay off his debt. And to a Jew, money is being owed. That's the way he can pay this Jew back. And that's why he's a slave. And like I said, there's many things about slaves. They need to eat first before you can eat. You need to give them a pillow before you have a pillow. And various things like that. And also slaves look after the house. So obviously they are also not bound by positive time-bound mitzvot, because that will distract them from their actual mission, which is looking after the household. And minors is boys that's under 13 and girls which is under 12. And they are not actually obligated to keep any mitzvot, but we do teach them how to observe the mitzvot, and it's considered chinuch. It's considered part of their education. And some of the positive time-bound mitzvot, it's just not possible to take a boy, let's say he's 10 years old, he's only obligated when he's 13, to take him to Shachris, Mincha, and Mariv, because he might be more of a distraction to everyone there than it is a benefit for him as chinuch. So that's why these three are grouped together. And the first thing that the Mishnah exempts women from, women slaves and minors, is the recitation of the Shema. And we know from this that the Shema is time-bound, because it says just after the Shema is Shema Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Yom Israel, I'm the Lord your God is one, which is the Jewish creed. Just after that it says, and you shall talk about these things when you walk on the way, when you lie down, and when you arise. Meaning there's certain times that the Shema needs to be said. And because women are busy with children, and they're busy taking care of the house, they're not obligated to recite the Shema in its specific time. Now the wording is very important whenever you are learning the Talmud. It says clearly here that they are exempt from the recitation of the Shema. This does not mean that they cannot say the Shema. Most women say the Shema because it is the Jewish creed, and they teach it to the children, so it's obviously important for them to know the Shema. But men, if we do not say the Shema, it's a positive time-bound mitzvah, we are losing out on that mitzvah. Where if a woman were not to say the Shema, they don't lose out because they are not obligated to recite the Shema anyway. It's obviously nice if they do say the Shema, but they are not obligated, so they are not losing out if they did not recite the Shema on any given day. Next is the topic at hand, and from tefillin, meaning that women are not required to wear tefillin because tefillin is time bound. Men mostly wear tefillin in the morning. In the old days, men used to wear tefillin the whole day, but we are no longer at that spiritual level. So we normally only wear it in shacharis, the morning prayer. And it is because it is connected to the Shema as well. And it says in the Shema that you shall bind it as a sign upon your arm, and it shall be tefillen or sign between your eyes. And then there's various halachot where you should actually put it, and it's something to be studied. But and I did make a video about it, so you can watch that video if you want to learn more about tefillen in general, but that is not the subject at hand. So also clear from this mishnah is that women are exempt from tefillen, meaning they don't have to put on tefillen. But that doesn't come to say that they can't put on tefillen, which is the question that was asked by my YouTube subscriber. And now we're going to get into the Gemara. The Gemara states as follows, and this is in Daf 20b. We also learn in the Mishnah that women are exempt from tefillin. The Gemara asks, that is obvious as well. The donning of tefillin is only in effect at particular times during the day but not at night, on weekdays but not on Shabbos, or on Chagim, festivals. The Gemara replies, lest you say, since the mitzvah of tefillin is next to another section in the Torah, which describes the mitzvah of mezuzah, as it is written, and ye shall bind them as a sign upon your arm, and they shall be tefillin between your eyes, which is in Devarim 6 verse 8. But that is followed by another verse which says, and you shall write them upon the doorposts of your house and upon your gates, talking about mezuzahs. So there is an oral law. And if two verses are next to one another, they come to connect one another and they are relating to one another. So the Gemara continues, just as women are obligated in the mitzvah of mezuzah, because the Mishnah also stated that women are obligated in the mitzvah of prayer, mezuzah, and grace after meals. So you could think that because women are obligated to put a mezuzah in the house at every doorpost of every entrance, they are also obligated to wear tefillin, because it is, these two verses are right next to each other, and we learn in the oral law that if two verses are next to each other, then they relate to one another. Therefore, the Mishnah teaches us that nevertheless women are exempt. We also learn in the Mishnah that women, slaves and children are obligated in prayer. The Gemara explains that although the mitzvah of prayer is only in effect at particular times, which would lead to the conclusion that women are exempt, nevertheless, since prayer is supplication for mercy, and women also require divine mercy, they are obligated. However, lest you say, since regarding prayer it is written, evening and morning and afternoon, I pray and I cry aloud, and he hears my voice, which is in TEFILLIN 55 verse 18, perhaps prayer should be considered a time-bound positive mitzvah, and women would be exempt. The Mishnah teaches us that fundamentally the mitzvah of prayer is not time-bound, and therefore everyone is obligated to pray. So that is basically the Gemara that deals with this topic, if women can wear tefillen. And what we've learned in the Mishnah, which ends on Daf 20a, is that women are exempt from wearing tefillen, but it doesn't say that women can't wear tefillen. So now we're going to go into the side notes, which is in the Koran Talmud, which is going to give us the practical halakha that we practice today. And it states as follows: those exempt from the mitzvah of tefillen. Women and slaves are exempt from tefillen if women want to assume a stringency, a chumrah, and put on tefillen, they should be rebuked. This is in Rambam, Sefer Ahava, in the Mishnah Torah. It's also in the Rambam, Hilchot TEFILLIN, Mezuzah, the Sefer Torah, also in the Mishnah Torah. It is also contained in the Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim 38 verse 3. So from this we learn the practical halakha that women that do wear tefillen should be rebuked, because they're taking on a stringency that doesn't apply to them. They're taking on a chumrah that wasn't meant for them. There's also numerous laws about tefillen. You should be clean. So obviously if a woman is on a menstrual cycle, for sure she cannot wear tefillen. If she's having some other issues, as I have explained in my video, everything you need to know about tefillen, there's various laws that you need to learn before you can put on tefillen. Now, I actually studied this with my rabbi before making this video, and I told him it's not 100% clear that women cannot wear tefillen, because the Mishnah says women are exempt from wearing tefillen, which means that women do not need to put on tefillen. But if they want to put on tefillen, there's nothing in the Mishnah, which comes from Tanaim, actual rabbis, to tell them that they can't do it. But we do have halakha from the Shulchan Aruch, which tells us that women should be rebuked if they put on tefillen. Now, my rabbi went through this with me in great detail, and he's a Talmid Chacham, was many years in yeshiva, 15 years in yeshiva, and he told me in the Shulchan Aruch, it actually says that women should be rebuked when wearing tefillen if they wear it in public, because that means they are making a statement that we can wear tefillen. It says in the Torah that you shouldn't separate yourself from the community. So you shouldn't do something that the majority of the community is not doing. Because then basically you're trying to create your own version of Judaism. And that is why it says in this section that women should be rebuked for wearing tefillin, but they should be rebuked for wearing tefillin in public. So I asked my rabbi, so what if a woman is married to a man and she wants to put on tefillin in private, in her house? No one sees her putting on the tefillin. It's just her and her husband. Can she put on tefillin? And she's obviously not on a menstrual cycle, and she has no other issues which relates to tefillin, and she knows the law of tefillin. Can she put on tefillin with her husband alone? There's no windows, no one can see her basically putting on tefillin. And my rabbi said, that's Rabbi Yitzchak Steinberg, said that he can find no reason why a woman cannot put on tefillin in private, in her own house, with no windows so that no one can look in and see her putting on the tefillin, which would be the same as putting on tefillin in public. He can find no source or no reason why a woman cannot put on tefillin in public, obviously with her not being in a menstrual cycle. And obviously if she knows all the laws of tefillin and she adheres to it strictly and she is observant. So that is basically the answer of, can a woman put on tefillin? That was the whole vort, and that is why it's part of advanced Jewish learning. So basically, yes, a woman can put on tefillin, but not in public, and not when she is in a menstrual cycle. And if she knows all the laws pertaining to tefillin, she can put it on in private with no one seeing her except her husband. Also, obviously, if there's kids involved, if there's already kids in the house, she shouldn't put it on in front of the children, because then she's also making a statement and separating herself from the community, and kids talk and they might tell it to their friends and say, my mother puts on tefillin, and that could create a lot of issues. So obviously that is why my rabbi gave it with that exact details. If she's completely alone in her house, she can put on tefillin. And if she's with her husband who understands the situation, she can also put tefillin. But if there's anyone else present, she cannot put on tefillin. If there's any windows of people looking in, that is the same as wearing tefillin in public, which we learned in the Talmud and in the Mishnah Torah and in the Shulchan Aruch, that women should be rebuked if they do that. And that is basically the answer to your question. I hope you continue to be blessed in everything that you do. Shavua.